Champagne is only champagne if it comes from Champagne and if it adheres to a huge number of regulations that make the resulting product in the bottle high quality enough. So in order for us or other brands to put champagne on the label, we now are all working towards some sustainability goals. And we will, as a brand and as growers, need to hit those goals in order to continue to call ourselves Champagne in the future. We may be competitors in the market, but we really are partners in sustainability.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Humpton, CEO of Siemens USA, and welcome back to The Optimistic Outlook. Finding ways to achieve greater sustainability, reduce carbon emissions, and manage waste are key objectives for companies in industries of all kinds, from transportation to agriculture to construction. Over the last few months, you've heard me talk with John Kreitz about sustainability in manufacturing and Bill Gates about climate technologies for energy and industry. Today's episode follows on that theme of sustainability, only this time we're headed out of Silicon Valley, past the city and the factories and the railway stations, and heading straight for the fields, or should I say vineyards. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Michelle DeFeo, president of Laurent-Perrier US, who will be talking with us through the bubbly world of champagne. We'll discuss sustainability in the food and beverage sector, Laurent-Perrier's climate goals and actions, and what it means to innovate with champagne. Let's get into the conversation. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thanks so much for having me.
When it comes to champagne, I'm sure there are dozens of considerations when it comes to responsible production and, everything from water use to responsible land use, et cetera. Could you just tell our audience a little more about the kinds of sustainability challenges you're seeing in viticulture?
Certainly. So Champagne has been concerned about sustainability for a very long time. We were the most northerly wine growing region in the world. Actually, for centuries in Champagne, it was extremely difficult for us to get the grapes ripe enough because we didn't have enough warmth. So we were really at the vanguard of recognizing when things started getting warmer in the climate, we had a decline in the yields in terms of the number of grapes that we were producing. We've had an increase in the last 20-something years of over 3 degrees in our average temperature each growing season. And Champagne actually became the very first wine growing region in the world to take this seriously and to conduct an assessment, which we began in 2002, we completed in 2003. So understanding what are the things that we're doing, what are the things that we need to change. We realized that packaging was our number one issue in terms of our carbon footprint. And then when it came to transportation of our products, that was representing about 17%. And then, of course, we have the actual wine growing and winemaking operations, which actually account for under 20% of this carbon footprint. But there are all kinds of things that we identified as, okay, here are areas that we can improve.
So, Michelle, tell us a bit about the regulatory concerns related to this trend.
We have a lot of regulations in the Champagne region, and the appellation overall, the appellation meaning the governing body, well, first of all, they decide on whether or not we're allowed to be called Champagne. Champagne is only champagne if it comes from Champagne and if it adheres to a huge number of regulations that make the resulting product in the bottle high quality enough. So in order for us or other brands to put champagne on the label, we now are all working towards some sustainability goals. And we will, as a brand and as growers, need to hit those goals in order to continue to call ourselves Champagne in the future. So the appellation takes it very seriously.
I'm delighted to hear the appellation overall is taking it so seriously. I'd love to now drill in a little bit to Laurent-Perrier. And your company has received certificates for sustainable viticulture and Champagne and high environmental value. Tell us more about what you specifically are doing for these sustainability initiatives and your own climate goals.
So Laurent-Perrier has been we've been making champagne for over 200 years. Our house was founded in 1812, and over the course of that entire history, we've only ever been family owned. We are the largest family run house in Champagne, and we've only been owned by 2 families. This is the region where the family has lived for so many generations. So the house and family have been working on sustainability for many, many, many years, even before the appellation was looking at it. Wastewater is a very significant part of making wine. We have a lot of tanks. The tanks need to be cleaned, so we are using a lot of water. Then we also have that wastewater. We actually built our own wastewater treatment plant for winery operations, and that was over 20 years ago. So we made sure that nothing was going into the groundwater, and now even the sludge that results from the water usage is composted. So we set ourselves goals, which we track. In addition to the ownership that the family controls, we actually have a minority portion of the house of the group that is publicly traded on the Euronext. And every year we have been publishing for decades our progress towards the various environmental goals that we've had. So one of them, of course, was to make sure that we had nothing that was going into the groundwater, and we achieved that many years ago. We've been practicing sustainable viticulture with various forms of biodiversity. So instead of being a monoculture where we have many, many acres of vineyards, instead of only seeing vines in those vineyards, you'll now see plantings of trees and hedges to make sure that we are introducing a much healthier ecosystem. We also made sure that we stopped using pesticides. We achieved our goal of being 100% pesticide free some years ago. And kind of a little aside, the French term, the way that we do this is through a process called mating disruption of the various insects. The bugs come into the vineyards and then their mating is disrupted. And I just have to share that the French have the best name for this. It's called confusion sexuelle. I'll leave it to the French, right? So we've been practicing confusion sexuelle in our vineyards. So we've been pesticide free for many years, 100%. We also built a new winery, and when we did, we made sure that energy conservation was at the absolute top of our priority list. So you'll see that it is built underground for temperature control, but with enough light to get natural light. So we use very little electricity, or as little as possible. And we have been using lighter weight glass bottles. Now, of course, glass in champagne has to be quite thick in order for the pressure to remain in the bottle. It's like as much air that's in a double-decker bus tire. So we need to have strong glass, but we have been able to use the lighter glass bottles. And then we've also been reducing the packaging and the packaging waste. So only using recycled paper products. We were actively targeting becoming utilizing the circular economy as much as possible. So now all of our vine cuttings are actually sold to cosmetics companies. So you can get some wonderful cosmetics that actually are made from the vines of Champagne at Laurent-Perrier. And then we achieved our zero landfill goal from winemaking operations about 4 or 5 years ago, where nothing that we do as the result of our winemaking ends up in landfill. Everything is recycled.
What an incredible story. You've shared with us so much about what you're doing locally and with new materials and the circularity of the supplies that you're using. But what are you doing about transportation? If grapes must come from Champagne in order to be then producing this fabulous product, how do you manage that part of the ecosystem?
It's certainly a big challenge. And this is something that, because of the specificity, not only of the grapes need to be grown in Champagne, so the product does need to be made there, and it then has to go into the bottle, and the bottle in which it is ultimately sold has to age in our cellars. And by law in Champagne, that bottle has to age underground or in cellars in Champagne for a minimum of 15 months. For us, we do a minimum of 3 years, but all of that has to occur in Champagne. So the challenges that we have, certainly as an industry and as a house, are then how do we get it from one place to the next? Now, something that we've certainly been doing, and it's a bit mind-blowing that anyone would still do this, but air freighting, of course, it is something that some brands do engage in order to make sure that they're getting their product to the market quickly. We don't do any air freight. We do cargo freight. We have very optimized containers. We make sure that we are doing as much as possible to, again, the lighter glass bottles certainly helped with that, but then optimizing every container that comes in. And there are now some cargo ships that you may have seen that are using wind power. And we have had some conversations, although we are not yet using that. We are certainly looking into it because we would like to find that solution. And we also only ship in full containers. We only ship in 40-foot containers, not in 20-foot containers. We do centralized warehousing in the United States, which allows us to just bring things in the most maximally efficient way possible. So there's still a long way to go. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're continuing to look for options. Now, on a more local level, I can say that we actually encourage train travel here within the U.S. And speaking of Siemens, I'm very excited as a dedicated Amtrak customer and Brightline as well to be traveling on some of the new train sets that you guys are building. Certainly, I've actually put about 25,000 miles that I have personally traveled on Amtrak just in the last several years.
I'm thrilled that you're a train traveler, and we have put so much attention and investment into building the train travel of the future here in the United States. One more thing I would note is over this past year, I had the chance to make a visit to Copenhagen. And while there, visited Maersk. And you may be aware that Maersk is doing a tremendous amount of work on carbon-free shipping. I had the chance to see an engine driven by ammonia. And so lots of innovation going in. I love the idea of the sailing ship, but honestly, when the work must be done in one place in the world, and then transported elsewhere, kudos to you for looking for the low impact ways of making that happen. This brings us to the subject of innovation because, it's interesting. I love when I tell the story of Siemens, I love to make the statement that Siemens would have been a garage startup if garages had been invented in 1847. Werner von Siemens and his brother actually began their business in the stable behind their home and really put their attention as inventors, tinkerers, to the big problems of the day. And I know that your own founder was an inventor himself and an innovator. Tell us about the spirit of innovation at Laurent-Perrier and what that looks like today. How do you keep that spirit alive? And by the way, any compliments for my French pronunciation?
Oh, mais c'est parfait, madame. C'est absolument parfait. Yes, you nailed it, Barbara. You absolutely nailed it. Bernard de Nonancourt is indeed, he is the man with the, Stephanie and Alexandra de Nonancourt are currently the directors of the house on our management board. And it was their father, Bernard, who was the first person in the de Nonancourt family to run Laurent-Perrier once their family bought it, or after their family bought it in 1939. And he stepped right in and said, how can we do things differently? At the time, the style in champagne was to make champagnes that were on the heavier side. They were still doing oak barrel fermentations. And he decided that that was really kind of too heavy of a style. And he decided to find some other options that would make champagne light, fresh, pure, elegant, that had nothing, no oxygen, no oak. He just wanted to taste the grapes in Champagne, the purity of that terroir. So he began doing some experiments. He moved from oak barrels to concrete tanks that had kind of a porcelain lining. And then from there, he went even a step further and he imported a stainless steel tank from Sweden that was actually used for dairy. We actually became the first winery in Champagne to go 100% to stainless steel. So that was kind of a huge innovation in terms of the way that the wines are made, because without any of the introduction of oxygen, you're getting champagnes where they're floral, they're fresh, they're bright, they're elegant, they're very easy to drink. So then after that, he innovated in many different ways in terms of how various wines were made.
This has just been so much fun to hear from you. I'm curious, as I love to ask each of my guests about their optimistic view of the future. I can't wait to hear what you see as you look forward into the world of sustainable viticulture. What advancements and improvements, what innovations or ideas make you excited for Laurent-Perrier's future?
I'm very optimistic about how the entire appellation has gotten together and it continues to work together. We may be competitors in the market, but we really are partners in sustainability. And one example of the way that brands that compete quite a bit in the market, but are working together very closely now, is in a project called Vitibot. So the Vitibot it's an autonomous electric machine that can be used in the vineyards to do various tasks that do not require someone being in the vineyards. It's a much lighter machine. It is electric. It can be run from an app instead of having a physical person having to be on that tractor. We have less soil compaction. We have less use of carbon. And we also can use fewer pesticides because it actually has some AI. It's AI enabled to be able to identify good plants versus bad plants. So we were one of the main houses to invest in the Vitibot system. and it's currently in development. And we did that along with several other major competitors who also invested. I'm also optimistic on kind of the wine geek side. It's a bit of kind of finding the silver lining in something that obviously is a very serious problem. But in Champagne, in the appellation, there are 7 grapes that we are legally allowed to grow. And that has been the case for many, many years. Now, some of these grapes are struggling in the current climatic conditions that we have. So we're looking towards the future and doing tests on new hybrid varieties of wine grapes. We may even end up with some wines that are more delicious than the ones that we make in Champagne today.
You know, recognizing the strong lineage of Laurent-Perrier, how did you yourself come to be affiliated and get started in this fabulous career?
Yeah, I actually majored in French and majored with a degree in French and political science. So I was very good at arguing and discussing politics in French. And of course, when you're doing that in a lovely cafe, you're oftentimes having a glass of wine with that. So I got very lucky to kind of fall into the wine business that way and answered an ad for a bilingual administrative assistant, and then began working in the wine industry for a champagne importer. And here I am almost 3 decades later, never looking back. It's a wonderful industry to be in. And of course, having wine at the end of every day, having champagne at the end of every day is certainly quite a privilege.
And can I say that for all those assistants who are listening in out there, it's amazing to think about where you can take your career. Just get launched, get into a field, get started, and let it carry you. Oh, Michelle, the family and the appellation are really lucky to have you. Thank you so much for all that you've shared with us today. To end this week's episode, I would love to offer a toast to you, to our many colleagues at Siemens and Laurent-Perrier, and to all our listeners, that we may create an even more sustainable world in 2025. And for that, could I ask you to join us in opening a bottle of champagne?
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful thing to toast to.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much for the lesson to sustainability in 2025.
Cheers to that. Cheers.
It's a joy to see sustainability in action for the food and beverage sector. At Siemens, we like to say we drink our own champagne, or in other words, we use the same technologies to drive our own net zero goals that we bring to the marketplace. But right now, in this moment, I'm pretty happy to say I drink Laurent-Perrier's champagne. Wow, this was so good. Cheers to all of you, and I'll see you all next time.
Please follow us on social media and on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you for tuning in.